is about ageism. That social norm that seems to be all permeating and a driver in abuse and neglect situations. Am I supposed to wait?
Yes. We don't want to miss a word for it.
You will get to use the clickers again. And I'm going to try and not make a mistake this time. How are you doing so far? Are you guys okay? Okay. So this session is ageism is a social norm that we can learn to recognize in ourselves and our systems. So I wanted to just share a few quotes with you before we turn it over to our esteemed panel. Ageism, so this is a quote from Charmaine Spencer, and many of you will know her, and it's, she sends her best wishes. She was not able to be with us. But she wrote that to the extent to which older people do not fit the perceived social norm, they are treated as less, which may include being less valued and less visible. They become relegated to a second-class status. Their needs and their lives are treated as if they do not matter as much. And further to that, she says, as a society, we seldom think to question the basis for our attitudes and beliefs. People simply incorporate the societal norms and values into their own way of thinking about and behaving toward older adults, which I think is what we've been hearing this morning already from Alan, and and also our call to look at ourselves. So what do we know about ageism? We know that it is the most tolerated form of social prejudice, that 6 in 10 seniors say they have been treated unfairly or differently, specifically because of their age. We know that 1 in 3 Canadians admit that they treat older people differently. We know that 8 in 10 agree that seniors are seen to be less important, and that 1 in 3 see older Canadians as a burden. So that's what we're trying to fix. That's what we're trying to shift. Okay, clicker questions. Okay, so I'm going to try to do it right this time. So share your clickers. So the attitudes we have about aging put older adults at risk. A, I strongly agree. B, I somewhat agree. C, I somewhat disagree. D, I strongly disagree. Keep going. Okay. Last call. Okay, so strongly agree. There's a lot of people that think that. And, it's really important that we pay attention to what we're all thinking, and we're all learning about this, because just because some people have a different attitude doesn't mean that there's, or a different understanding doesn't mean that there's something that we can't learn. And sometimes it's the one voice, right, that we can learn the most from. Okay, so on that note, I wanted to turn this session over to our esteemed panel. So we have from my left going further left, I'd like to introduce the 3 following women. So first on my left is Sherry Baker. Sherry is the Executive Director of the BC Association of Community Response Networks, and she has been there since 2010. That was actually a shock to me to read that, Sherry, 5 years. So it's a provincial organization that supports community response networks around the province, and there's like 117 or 118 communities in BC that are covered by community response networks. Sherry has been a servant of community for more than 40 years and is currently chairing the Langley Seniors Advisory Committee, where she also lives. And we work closely together as another BC person. So thank you for being here, Sherry. Welcome.
Thank you.
And so what I'll do is I will introduce all three panelists, because they have a bit of an experiment that it's sort of a quasi-fishbowl thing that they're going to explain to you. But they're going to be having a conversation and following a set of slides. And they're also going to show you two of the products from the It's Not Right for Older Adults, two of the 10 scenarios. So you'll start to get a chance to see those. So Elliot Paz Jensen. Sorry, I just need to find that. I could actually introduce her without reading it, but I actually want to actually put what she actually wanted to say about herself, except that I can't find it. But Elliot described herself in her write-up as an older woman. She put that first. And she is a retired social worker who worked in the health system for many, many years, and is driving force behind the Saskatoon Council on Aging. So thank you for being here. And Marge Thiessen, I just had the pleasure of spending a very quick, less than 24 hours in Regina with her and her colleagues at the Centre for Lifelong Learning. Marge has been a volunteer for 40 years. She's a teacher. She has a social marketing background, and she gives a lot of presentations on behalf of lifelong learning on abuse and neglect prevention and ageism and volunteering. So over to the esteemed panel.
Oh my goodness, an esteemed
Welcome.
panel. Thank you so much, Allison, and it's great for us all to be here. We've been planning this for a few weeks, I don't know, quite a long time actually, and we decided to try and do something that was more intimate and a little more interactive, and so this is why we chose this sort of a modified fishbowl. And so it's an experiment, and we're going to be interrupting each other and kind of, because we're all quite verbal, to put it mildly. So you'll have to put up with that. But I thought it would be in the interest of transparency that I would put this forward to you, because it's sort of a planned, chaos that we're giving to you today. And so we really hope that you enjoy it, and we will give you some opportunities throughout this next hour to participate yourselves. So thank you for sharing this experience with us. And I just wanted to do a little bridge here with what we heard about from Alan about the bystander approach and the changing social norms, because what we're really going to be talking to you about are this deeply embedded social norm that is in our society, in all our societies, around ageism. And we all need to start thinking about what that is and how we are going to be able to change those norms as we move ahead. So Elliot's going to be kind of the point person for this. And Marge has several, assigned areas she's going to talk about, but we're all going to talk about everything, pretty much sharing our experiences. And I'm going to be the timekeeper. I'm going to be keeping everybody on track. So if I sound really rude at some point and interrupt somebody, they've already given me permission to do that, so it's okay. So Elliot.
There were just a couple of more things that we wanted to tell you about ourselves, and that is that Marge is, we've all heard about we don't talk about just the old people now, because really that's a 35 or 40 year span. And so we talk about the young old and the old. And so Marge is a young old person, and Sherry and I are both old. We wanted to tell you that.
You were both born the same year.
Right, yes.
So it was a good year.
Yes, that's right. It was a wonderful year. That's right. Unfortunately, the Second World War started that year, so that wasn't so good. But you and I were
born right after the Second World War.
Yes, right. And the other thing I wanted to point out is that Sherry is working, and Marge and I are volunteers. And I want you to note that I didn't say Sherry is still working, because that would be ageist. Right?
Right.
Yes, okay, good. So now we can start.
We can.
Now we can start.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Oh, I've got to move the
First
slides.
slide,
Oh,
yes.
my God. Okay. Steve, how do I move the slides? I've got the green button. No, we need to go back a long way.
Oh, wrong deck.
No, it's the same. There it is. Okay, there we go. Okay, so this is just a quick little entree to it. When we talk about growing up as a young people, we talk about that in a really positive way. But when we talk about getting old, it sounds really negative. So these are some of the ways that these norms have been embedded in our lives. So go ahead.
Oh, okay. So we know that ageism is something that we didn't study in school because nobody knew about ageism then. Ageism was only talked about 40 years ago, a little bit more, by Robert Butler. And he talked about it as stereotyping and discrimination. And he said that what ageism does is it allows younger people to see older people as different from themselves, and thus to subtly cease seeing them as human beings. And that's what ageism does. Next slide.
So we love this little slide. I think we all love it. It's the wheel of life. So if you look at the first slide and the last slide, they're both individuals being pushed by someone who is better than, more than the person in the chair, or perceived to be. So, and as we go through life, the next one is the three-wheeler, and how many of us are aware of the three-wheel scooters that we see in our communities? And so work your way through that little lifespan, and we see that the beginning and the end are very similar. Isn't it great?
Yeah, it's really just a really good picture of how, as we look at it, but within all that is just the joy and fun of things as well. But it's also that it applies to each and every one of us, but we vary in the ways that will be affected as we go through that wheel of life. And I think this one really is good for initiating discussion and bringing that out as well.
Because really, it's fun being in the cars that one is driving oneself. Mm-hmm. And even the second last one, however, that does start to get into some disability. You use a motorized cart or wheelchair, or not wheelchair, or cart, I guess, when you have some disabilities. And this is, as Alan pointed out, this is where the rub really hits. Ageism is an issue because people are seen as less competent, less attractive, as Charmaine said, less in every way. But where the rubber really hits the road is when one's abilities do start to slide, and they do. Most of us are not going to get out of here, out of life, suddenly. Most of us will have a period of a chronic disease where there are bumps along the road, and we will have more disabilities and need more help. And this is the part of life that does scare people. And now one might think that when you're older, you're more scared than when you're younger. And the interesting research is that we're not. And we're not. Even though after one of our discussions, which was really fun, I then emailed Marge and Sherry when I got back and said, gosh, after we talked, I went to the Globe Walk celebration. We were having a function that day. Seniors in Saskatoon are walking to the moon. We're almost there. So I went to this, and on my way in, I heard about a volunteer who'd had a stroke the previous day. I talked to a former colleague of mine who'd quit work 15 years ago because her husband had Parkinson's disease. Now he's got dementia, and she's a 24-hour caregiver, et cetera, et cetera. And so we're running into this kind of thing much more closely, more intimately. Mm-hmm. But it is part of life that one accepts. And we also feel we're very lucky to be here. We are lucky to be, and so one does count one's blessings more too. So one's perspective does change as one goes through the various stages of life.
Remember too that because our bodies are starting to age physically, many of us are not losing our mental acuity, and I certainly, you know, I do work and do run this provincial organization, but I have all kinds of issues around arthritis and knee replacements and blah, 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 you know, whatever. But anyway, I don't have time to think about it, so it's great.
You know, before you move on, I just wanted to just remind people that somebody shared this, that, you know what, I'm still the same person on the inside. It's the outside person that's changing. And that's just such a true statement that we all, you know what, I guess each one, well, I too, in effect, I'm part of that large popularity group of type 2 diabetes. You know, so lifestyle had to change and things had to change as a way that I wanted to keep on going with this. So, but I'm still me, and what you see is what you get.
So we're going to, right, this is great. So we're going to talk about ageism now. So, Elliot.
Okay. So let's go to the next slide. I think this is a beautiful slide, and it's a great introduction. So ageism, like all of the isms, are when you make up your mind about a group because they have characteristics, because of, they're part of that group. And we all have ageist attitudes, and I have to say that I thought that I had come to terms with I had unlearned my ageist attitudes, because I worked for 25 years in geriatrics in a hospital, and I loved it, and I loved the people I worked with, and so I really thought I'd worked through my ageist attitudes. And then I came up face to face with them. I was prepared. I did a talk for social workers whom I used to work with our health region about 5 years ago now, and I used to be very, I hated grand rounds. I hated making presentations. I was so nervous. One of the things about being older is that you don't worry about it quite as much. And so anyway, I did this presentation, and then I ad-libbed, and I forgot something. I forgot a statistic, and I just panicked, and I said, I'm having a senior's moment. And everybody laughed, and I laughed, and I gained my composure back, and I kept on going. And that was ageist. And then when I was preparing for it, I was thinking about an incident that had happened when my grandson, then 5, said to me, Grandma, you've got crinkly skin. And I said, yes, I do. And he said, that's because you're old. And I said, yes, I am old, Andrew. And he said, you're really, really old. You're the oldest in the family. Whereupon I said, oh, no, I'm not. Grandpa's much older than I am, and so is Nandy, and so is so-and-so. And so afterwards I was thinking, what was I teaching him? I was teaching him it's okay to be a little old, but it's terrible to be really old. and so I came up short and realized, gosh, those ageist attitudes, that's, as you said earlier, Sherry, they are embedded. They're embedded.
Well, my 3 children, my 3 adult children, when they hear what I'm doing, sort of, I don't tell them everything because it would be too much. But anyway, they say, oh, Mom, that's great. Keep on working, it's keeping you young. And I'm going, I don't care about being young. But so I can add all kinds of perceptions to that. They don't have to worry about me because I'm still working. But you know, it's the ageism thing. As we assume that we want to be young as we get older. People assume that older people want to be young. They want to look young. They want to be young. I don't think that's true. It is for some people, but I don't think the majority of us feel that way.
The one I wanted to share is my grandchildren are in Calgary. I live in Regina. That would be the home of the Riders, by the way, for anybody that's a football fan. Just thought I'd slide that in. Right on. And it was really interesting. I had opportunity to care for my grandchildren while their parents were away on a trip. And I went to the school to pick him up. They have to be, there's no bus service. So anyway, my listen to that, my grandson got into the car, and I said, and how was your, no, he said, I said, how was your day? Good, Grandma. And he said, you know, one of my friends, Eden, said, oh, your grandma's over. That must be boring because she's really old. But this is his reply, which I just have grasped onto, and he goes, oh no, my grandma's not old. She can still go down a slide and get up at the end. So, as you can tell, the lens that I look through is the lens where I see the best in everything. So I just wanted to share that part because he helped me realize that in his eyes, he doesn't view me any different on the outside than I am in the inside. So that's why I wanted to share. But thank you for chuckling because I laughed so hard.
So ageism is a fact. We can see how ageism is a factor in abuse. If older adults are valued less, if their needs don't count as much, and really later on, when we get further along, we're going to see that that is widely held, then it's all right to say, well, why does my mother, or people feel it's all right to say, my mother doesn't need the money. I need it now. You know, I need to pay a mortgage. She has no wants right now. Her opinion doesn't count because she's really not as competent as she used to be. She's not as competent as I am now, and so it sets the stage for abuse. It makes it socially acceptable and tolerated.
But you know, I wanted to just say that one of the things we have to be very careful of as we get older is not to flip it and make comments in regards to the young, as you know, and I've done that. Gosh, does everybody have to spend time on their iPhone? And you know, young people don't talk anymore. Those kinds of things. So we have to be very sensitive of that mutual respect aspect as well.
Not generalize.
And not generalize. Absolutely.
Those are the stereotypes that we build. So
Sherry, you are not too old to work.
Yeah.
thank you. I never didn't think I was.
And Ma, you look young.
I've promised my staff I'm going to be doing this till I'm 85, so I don't know that I think that's a good thing or not, but that's my goal. Maybe longer. Okay. So I think sort of a question, how many of you have not seen the slide deck where It's Not Right? Anybody not seen it? Perfect. So you recognize some of these slides from the slide deck, so we're not going to go through it all in great detail as we might if you were seeing this first. And we assumed when we started out that you had seen it. So we are going to go over some of the things very quickly, but Elliot, I don't think we need to read this to them.
So.
No. But it is part of that slide deck, and there's some positive things in there, of course. I mean, we are all angels, aren't we, after all?
And we're never cranky.
No. You know, the thing is that there are older adults who are slower than they were because of what's happening to their bodies. I think Alan used a phrase, something about having difficulty managing their body. I can't remember exactly what it was, but sometimes our bodies just don't work for us, and when we get older or have a disability, that is the case. There are older adults who are mentally incompetent. My best friend in school is in a nursing home and may or may not recognize her family and me, for example. And so this does happen to people. And so some of the jokes when one gets older really are very painful, I have to say. But the stereotypes are true of some people, and that is what makes them really tough.
You know, we see We see this in some of the slides in the stereo or the scenarios, the video scenarios, and those of you who are familiar with them, they really bring out a lot of those stereotypes. The woman who goes to the doctor with her daughter, and the doctor only speaks to the daughter, things like that. I mean, it's just, you know, we all know that. So another stereotype. How many of you are familiar with this particular Maclean's cover? It was on not too long ago, two or 3 months ago. And it did elicit a lot of letters to the editor from people in, I assume a lot of them were older adults, not necessarily, that this is absolutely not true. But this sat on the newsstands for a couple of weeks, and it also is probably still floating around doctors' offices, because you know how current their publications are.
So really what we need to say is yes, there are wealthy older Canadians, as there are wealthy people of all ages. There are also poor older Canadians, as there are poor Canadians of all ages. The poor older Canadians tend to be older people living alone, particularly women over 85, women who are divorced or single, Aboriginals, and immigrants. And that's very important. Another very important factor is that we've already talked about the fact that old age can last 35 or 40 years. And so what may be a reasonable income that one retires on at 65, and many of us, well, not you, but I certainly retired when there was mandatory retirement. You retire at 65, and so what is a reasonable income then, by the time you're 95 and your costs are much, much higher, are very high, your income is much less, because inflation has been 2% a year on average in Canada, and so you multiply that by 30 years and you see what you get in terms. So this article really overlooked some pertinent facts that really affect older adults and womped up this whole discussion that's now taking part on the generation squeeze.
Again, this is a slide from the slide deck, and we don't need to go into it in a lot of details, but it's important to understand that the behaviors that are so closely embedded in our society just pop out. And I mean, I know when people are in a wheelchair and you're talking to them, there's a tendency to raise your voice. And there's nothing usually wrong with their hearing. But it seems to be a reaction, treating older people like children, calling them dearie and sweetie and hun and all the rest of it.
I think that in there, I have the privilege also of, when I do presentations, I'm doing it with another older adult, and which is really quite a delight. And she's a very strong lady, and she was for lunch with her daughter. Menus were given, and waitress came to take the order and took it from her daughter first, and this is what the waitress said to Maria's daughter. "And what will she have?" Well, wrong person to do it to. And she just shared that I can hear, I can speak, and I can read. And I didn't require that or something like that, but I'm just reminded of that. And again, it's much like, the assumptions that we're all in the same.
One of the things I love about this
time, and we need to move on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I told them I was going to do this. Okay, Steve, it's time for the next, the first animation. So he's going to cut me off, and we're going to see this little animation. We won't spend a lot of time with it, but Marge is going to talk about it. So Steve's going to make it happen in his magic place down there.
So watch it closely.
Can I help you? I'm an important man. I ran an important company, employed thousands of people. I've never needed anyone.
Good for you. That's what we like to hear.
It was interesting as I was looking out over as the slide was just finishing. It was really wonderful to see that, you know, it's time that we stop being, well, I'll put my own words in there, so independent. So I just first and foremost want to thank you for the nods, as you can relate to that. But not only do we have to dwell on the man that's, you know, that's in the chair, we also those that are around him as well. And isn't it amazing how it just shows how strongly independent we can be, and that we just have to take that step and know when it's the right time to accept the help. Thank you, Sarita. And so that, you know, he really was more telling about the importance that he had, and rather than seeing that, you better get out of the rain, you're going to get soaking wet, and have that. Or run over. Or run over.
But for me, it's the attitude that many of us who are older adults have about being fiercely independent, to the point of being putting ourselves at risk. And we need, as we grow older, to acknowledge and reach out. I have a hard time doing that, but I do actually do that, and it's important. So I know when we show this to groups, sometimes they get hung up on whether or not this man should be on the street and he's going to get wet and what the people are saying. But the message really is we need to make sure that as we get older, we can accept help, and those of us around us need to know how to offer the help in such a way that it can be accepted. And that can be a huge conversation in the room when we do that. So just as an idea. So if I can go back to my slides. Magic. Yes, it worked. Okay, and I love this. If getting older is something we do every day, there are no exceptions, why do we discriminate against older people when we all one day will be the older ones? It's a puzzle.
Providing that you're lucky. I mean, really and truly, we recognize how lucky we are to be older, because all of us have lost people along the way, and it could have been us. I mean, there's no, it's just totally by chance as to who. You know, my sister died of breast cancer. You know, why not me? Why my friend who has dementia? Why not me? You know, they're just, and I could go on, and you could go on too. So we are lucky to be here. You know, and so you don't want to discriminate against what you will become yourself, what we will become ourselves. I need to keep on, because we're still becoming too.
We're going to show the family table scenario. Lots of you have probably seen this, but we want you to look at this specifically from the older adult's point of view, the gentleman in this scenario. And we're going to give you a chance at your tables for about 5 minutes, not a long time, but to have a little discussion about it from the older adult's point of view, what's going on. And so let's take a look at it. Steve will set this up for us. This is here we are. So.
I've lived in this house nearly 50 years.
We know, Dad.
Well, the market's not going to get any better, and neither is his health.
It's the right move to make financially, and God knows these bills never stop.
I always pay the gas first, then electric, then
The
telephone.
house needs some work. Painting at a minimum, Maybe the roof?
That roof's good for another 10 years.
Can he afford that?
He doesn't have a choice. Not if we want a quick sale.
What are we gonna do with all his junk?
You can't buy furniture like that anymore.
We could always donate it.
Have you checked out some of these retirement communities?
They all look the same to me.
They don't all cost this.
It's one of my worst nightmares that that would ever happen to me. So, do you want to set the stage with that?
Just-
Yeah.
We'd like you to look at, and from the father's point of view, was there anything that made you feel uncomfortable? Did you see any signs of ageism? And we'd like you particularly to look at the effects of what happened on Dad. So it's 5 minutes, yeah. Just
Yeah,
if you
just a quick 5 minutes to talk about that. Because we've only got 15 minutes left.
Okay, then I'll.
Yes,
I'll
Yeah.
whip through quickly.
I'm shocked at how fast it goes.
Pardon?
I'm
Yeah.
shocked at how fast it
No,
goes.
it does.
I can whip through
Yeah. So,
the next ones. I'll whip through.
so this part is yours, so just, you know, I know that you can do that. And then we're pretty much finished after we've talked about the policy thing.
Yeah, with which?
After we've talked about the policy piece
Yeah,
that you're going to talk about.
And maybe we can give them a little bit less than 5.
Yes.
4.
Or,
Although this is good learning. This is good discussion. You know, it is good discussion.
One of the things that I always like
Should we sign up? Should we say though about at the end of it, just finish it off by saying, people say that they're invisible.
if which?
Should we finish off with that bit about, you know, that being ignored or visible?
yeah.
Nothing. Should we
Yeah,
say that?
yeah. Do you want to do that, or do you want
Okay, or
do you want Marge to
me
do
go
that?
ahead? Okay.
No, I'm
Mark.
good. I'm good.
Who's going to do that?
I will.
Okay.
Yeah, because I thought that that was
Yeah, okay.
yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm good.
Okay. It's just that I'm going to have a lot in the next part. But anyway,
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Then then I'm okay.
Maybe if we just do say, yes, Marge is going to say this because
Okay.
I've got a lot, and
What?
Marge will say the 3 stuff because I
Yeah,
I
you're
then
gonna do
have
the other, yeah.
other stuff. Yeah.
So Marge, you just do those quick those stats. It's
I can
on the
do that
one.
real
Have you
quick.
got it?
Just, yeah, I got it.
Yeah.
I've got it written here. Do this after the tape thing, because initially it was going to be you, but yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, good.
Yeah. Good.
Okay. When we start at 29? No, at
We started
31.
30.
It was 30 something.
31.
30, yeah.
31, I think, yeah.
It's 31 something, 31, 30 or something. The lady that's
Okay.
sitting at our
We're going to go back now.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to go back now, and we lied. It's not quite 5 minutes. Is that a good discussion at your table?
Looks like
Okay, I see you still want to keep going, but we only have, 13 minutes left to do what we want to do. So that red light keeps moving. Thank you. Did you enjoy that little discussion? Yeah. Okay, Marge is going to just give us a couple of stats that put this into perspective.
So the 3 most common forms of age discrimination reported by by Canadian seniors, and this is from the Rivera Report on Ageism in 2012, are being ignored or treated as though they are invisible, 41%. Being treated like they have nothing to contribute, 38%. The assumption seniors are incompetent, 27%.
That's it. kind of amazing. Don't you find those steps? So we're now going to, Elliot's going to take us through some of the policies and the background of some of this work that's been done on ageism, and so we're going to take that with the next few slides. So Elliot.
Okay. So we're looking at the father now in this situation, and we see him being ignored and treated as if he's invisible and his opinions don't count at all. And so we look at what are the effects on older people when this happens. And what studies are showing is that the effects, there are real genuine effects there. There is interesting research going on that shows that just subliminal images of aging quickly floated by, feeble, frail, slow. It changes an older adult's performance on gait testing, on cognitive testing. It changes their cardiovascular stress level. Whereas positive images, strong, resilient, they do better on the testing. There's very interesting research going on too that shows that older adults who incorporate the society's view that aging is decline, they don't look after themselves as well as older adults who don't see aging as decline. They see aging as a different stage in life, and therefore you have health challenges, and so you watch your diet, you take your medication, and you exercise, you look after yourselves. So if you internalize the negative stereotypes, it affects you. And there are some researchers that show that your life expectancy is less as well. They live about 7 years shorter than older adults who have a positive outlook on aging. They haven't incorporated this negative decline. Decline is inevitable. There's recent research showing too that people that have not incorporated the negative ageist beliefs those who haven't incorporated, they do better when they're doing rehab after a stroke or some incident that leads to disability. So it does matter. It matters hugely. Ageism has just incredible effects on people. And we know that Alan made the point of ableism. And we know that people with disabilities, we know that people who are of certain religions, of color, belong to certain races, whose sexual orientation is not the norm, they have suffered the same kinds of being treated as though they're not quite human all their lives. And when they get old enough to be treated with ageism, it's even worse. It's compounded when ageism intersects with the other isms. So now we'll go on to the next part. And I have to tell you that when I was looking at ageism years ago, preparing for this talk, I was absolutely floored that the policies and practices in healthcare should be so ageist when I really examined them. And so I'm so passionate about it that Sherry and Marge let me talk about it. because what the Ontario Human Rights Commission tells us is that while we do tremendous damage in our interpersonal relationships, that really the far reach is in the policies and practices of our institutions that are supposed to help us. And so some policies are based on ageist stereotypes. For example, some housing facilities have sign-out policies for mentally competent adults, as though they're children, they can't look after themselves. Some perpetuate, any ageist policy is going to perpetuate ageist policies, but for example, the lack of workplace policies to encourage older workers to stay in the job. That perpetuates they don't stay, and it just perpetuates that they're not competent enough to work. They discriminate. You look at the common practice today where medical practices, medical appointments are one medical problem, one appointment. while it appears to treat everybody the same because all patients are subject to that policy, it really affects adversely older adults who have chronic problems. I mean, that's, as we get older, we have chronic health problems, and the interaction of one affects the other. So this kind of policy, this kind of appointment simply does not work. Policies that reduce life satisfaction, the practice that Sherry referred to earlier of calling older adults dear. Well, I'm going to confess to you that when I first heard this, I was taking part in a meeting and somebody talked about this, and I thought, well, really, what does it matter that all these middle class, older women don't like being called dear? What does it matter? Well, the more I read about it, the more I found it mattered, because what it does is it says you're different. When I read about it really and thought about it, it says you're different from others. We don't call a middle-aged person sweetie or say good girl, but we do to an older person. What that's saying is you're different, you're not an adult anymore, you're a child. And what happens is that their self-esteem goes down, and that's true whether people are demented or when it's used in a dementia ward, or with older adults who are still living in the community and fine. And then undermining human dignity. I mean, how many times in healthcare and elsewhere, but especially in healthcare because I work there, how many times do people talk to the adult child rather than to the older adult? It happens all the time. And of course, it's going to undermine human dignity. So all of this is just very important. Let's go to the next slide. Next slide. So I was really struck by the Ontario Human Rights Commission talking about ageism as all these stereotypes and discrimination and so on. But the other part of ageism is the tendency to structure society based on an assumption everyone is young. And I loved Charmaine Spencer, who was referred to earlier. She talked about older adults as not being 35-year-olds with gray hair. But really, in other words, there's more change than that. So really, society is based on an assumption that older adults are just people with gray hair. And therefore, when that assumption is made, the real needs are not responded to. And the next slide. And what happens then is that, so when we look at what does it mean? What is a society based on the assumption everybody is young? So there are physical barriers and social barriers and systemic barriers. And really, if we were looking at, say, the healthcare system, the hospitals are set up, acute care hospitals were set up years ago when people lived to 65 and they had one health problem. Older adults who, and we will too, and you will too, when we get to be in our 80s and 90s, we will have multiple health problems. And so when we go to the doctor with a health problem, really the kind of help we need is not, it's been well demonstrated that going to the hospital is not good, because going to the hospital is you're going to go to bed, you're going to lose muscle mass, you're going to lose function, and that's not related to your disease, but to your hospital stay. And half of that is not going to be reversible. So going to hospital, the hospital system is terrible. It is built for people who are young. It is not built for the very old who are the highest consumers of it. We need a different model. And we really need this badly. So hospitals and much of our society are based on based on ageism and on the assumption that they're young. And the next slide.
I'd like to just come in now for a minute, because the work we're doing in our community and others. I live in Langley, British Columbia, and our Seniors Advisory Committee, we're trying to convince the council to change the building bylaws so that 100% of the new building will be built so that it can be adaptable to the needs of people as they age. It costs about $1,000 more to do it at the time of construction, what would take $100,000 to redo it later. So we're getting there. We're getting there.
We're trying hard to do that in Saskatchewan too, but we're told, I mean, even seniors' buildings are not built to be accessible. They're built to code, and that the code does not allow for wheelchair accessible. The doorways are too narrow for wheelchairs. The hallways often are too.
Well,
so,
the electrical plugs and the grab bars in the bathrooms and things like
We
that,
need
if it's
all
built
that.
into the construction, at the time of construction, doesn't, and then it's very easy to adapt it later when it's needed. So we're looking at that. And I think a lot of us are doing that throughout the country.
Absolutely
Yeah.
trying hard to do it. So the next slide is because, and why this is important is because it's not aging that's the problem. It's not aging that creates barriers for older people. It's the barriers are socially constructed. They're ageist. They are the beliefs and attitudes that we have. It's the physical structure that we have built up for our society. And so really, we need to do something about it. And as Sherry said, we are trying to, and I'm sure you are as well. And as Robert Butler said in 2002 at the Madrid Assembly, he talked about we must not simply bear witness to ageism. We must change it. We must do something. And we know that's what you're wanting to do too.
So old age is not a status we choose to become. It is a status that we inherit simply by the virtue of living, not dying. We need to remember that. Absolutely. So we are now going to be having, and you've got to, where's Allison? We're giving you 15 and a half minutes of your 15 minutes that you told us to give you for these questions, and you get to use your flickers now.
Yay, panel. Thank you.
We're not
you,
getting
guys.
older, we're just
Are
getting
you
better.
staying here? Or are you
Yeah, we're supposed, apparently we're staying here. Do you want us
are
to
we?
go?
I don't know.
We're easy. We get to use the clickers if we go.
Pardon?
We get to use the clickers if we go.
Oh, right
let's
on,
go.
we want to use the clickers.
Absolutely.
No, it's okay.
Oh.
Okay.
There you go. Flexibility. So we have a few minutes now to consider these questions. So it's another one of those table conversations, right? Of catching hold of inspired ideas. So in the next 15 minutes at your table, please consider the following questions. How do our attitudes perpetuate ageism? That's the first question. The second is, how do our perceptions of aging align with our experiences of aging? So that thing that Alan talked about this morning about correcting false beliefs. Third question, what are the challenges in talking about an ism to the general public? So 15 minutes, and remember that we're thinking about capturing your inspired ideas. So before you go for lunch, we are hoping that more of those are going to end up over on the brown map that's going to emerge. So 15 minutes. Oh, geez, you want to... So there's like, what, 3 quicker questions?
Just for, what are the challenges in talking about an ism? much easier at lunch to switch around.
Okay. Yes. Yes. Okay, so I know there's been lots of conversation, and we actually do have a couple minutes to hear what some of your inspired ideas are from those 3 questions. So if I could ask people who would like to sort of summarize or identify a key point that you've had at your tables, please head down to the mic at the back of the room.
Okay, and Alan told me that I'm not allowed to make up numbers because it actually, like, it works against us, right? So I'm going to say this differently. I'll bet there are people in the room who want to go to the microphone. Is that better, Alan? Is that okay? Is that okay? No numbers. I put no numbers.
Most people want to go to the microphone, but they think that most people don't.
Okay. By the time the conference is over, I will have this nailed.
Are you capturing it in writing instead of verbally? Thank you.
I'll try this. It wasn't my my idea, but so if it goes bad, it was Ken's. And basically what we talked about at our table was, because of the role we are in, whether it be police or victim services, that our experiences affect our perceptions that affect our attitudes. And although our perceptions may not be real, if you believe those perceptions to be real, they become real and you act as if they are real. And when you are only dealing with victims of elder abuse, your perception is that all older people become victims of elder abuse and they're not able to look after themselves, and we respond accordingly when we deal with them.
Wow, thank you. Isn't it great that we get to hear what each other are thinking?
Again, these are not my ideas, but my table's shy. So we talked about a little bit about the problem of the lack of positive ideas about aging, and that is, and even the way we're asking the question, if we're only looking at the problematic side of things, it kind of just gets us deeper in the same hole. And so how can we start really thinking about reflecting and sharing the positives of aging and respecting that? And then another idea, different but I also think important, that the way that ageism is so ingrained in our society, part of it has to do with just our whole capitalist economy and the way we've organized ourselves. And so the state is always looking to support us and how we advance as individuals in our life, but it doesn't look at how to support us as families, extended families, communities. And so as individuals, because of our work lives, because of our obligations, we have sometimes very few opportunities to be able to step outside of our daily life and actually be supportive and be creative in terms of how we live and interact with the older people in our lives.
Thank you.
Careful, Barb. Okay, Alison, it's okay if I can be one of the people on the floor, can I?
Absolutely.
Okay. So I was just thinking as Barb was talking that we have this weird idea about contribution, about what constitutes being a contributing member. of the world, right? And so you have to be able-bodied, you have to be young, like those kinds of things. And the truth of it is, you know, Al, it was a story that you told, Al, that I just really made sense to me about your friend who had AIDS, who was dying, and who said that when he couldn't climb the stairs, do you want to tell the story? It's your story, actually. This is actually a trick that I've done.
To get me to tell a story I didn't know I was going to tell. Okay, well, I could tell the story, but you might have to say why, what the key point is, that people's perspectives change. That, you know, he initially, when he said he could no longer climb the stairs to go to work anymore, my life won't be worth living, and I won't want to carry on. And then the day came that he couldn't go to work, he couldn't climb the stairs, and you know, ended up spending a lot of time laying in bed. And he started saying to me, well, I know that I said that I, you know, wouldn't feel like my life was worth living, but now I can look out the window and I can see all the flowers in bloom. And for today, that's enough.
And the piece that I wanted to add to that, Al, was what you said, that for the people around him to be involved and allowed to participate in the ending, in riding it out to the end with him, was that your lives were enriched as well.
Yes.
And so he gave to you,
Yes.
right? He gave to you, I think, in a really important way that we don't think about.
Exactly.
It's actually an interesting segue to what happened at our table. At our table, really, it's the cultural relevance of aging. If you're a family of origin, you know, thinks very highly of an elder as being somebody who's going to carry the wisdom and the faith forward, and you believe in that, then as you get older, you have a status that increases. What's interesting, though, is when you get into a culture, or your culture from your origin, is not the same as the culture of the country you moved to or what's in vogue, and all of a sudden what used to be positive, because of the perception of people around you, becomes negative. I mean, a lot of us from our table comes from cultures that, you know, our grandmothers are the ones that carried on the tradition, and et cetera, and maybe that's not, maybe our perception is that that's not important anymore. What's important is to be people that are productive, and that people that work and that create, very capitalistic, if you wish, versus the carrying on what's really important, which is being wise, and, you know, what do we share experiences in life so that we improve our relationships with others, and how we live as a community versus how successful we've been. And the image of success. So I think that has a lot to do. We need to maybe relook at that in terms of encouraging that, you know, people from most cultures anyway do have a certain, you know, family, try to promote certain family values. But there are certain cultures where being an older woman, and I make that particular, an older woman is a very special place to be. And I think we should bring that up as often as we can.
Thank you. Thank you. So it's just about lunchtime. So we have, guess what, one last clicker opportunity. But just a reminder, before we head out for lunch, that we want to capture the inspired ideas on these beautiful new Post-it notes that we've got. So I believe you now have some at your tables, so please don't be shy. Make your points and take them over to the table. And I will have one other announcement before we go for lunch, so the last clicker question before lunch. You can't be part of the solution if you aren't part of the problem. There are two choices. A, yes. B, no. Quite a few people haven't voted yet. It's because they want that middle ground, and I was told we're not having, it's yes or no. You guys, we're only at 60 or something.
It's okay, just give them a minute. I want to tell them not to take their clickers, leave the clickers at the tables, don't take them away.
Okay, we ready?
Yeah, just say okay.
Okay, last call. want to say something about that?
So this is always what's interesting, right? It's getting a chance to see what the room thinks. So there's a conversation on both sides of this. So what does it mean? You can't be part of the solution if you aren't part of the problem. What does that mean? And what does it mean to different people? It might mean different things to different people, right? This is part of trying to unpack these and move forward. I understand, I can see both sides of it. So there's no right answer here. When we're doing the clickers, this is not about having a right answer. It's about saying, so what do you think? Where are we? So as a group, this is reflective of
Where we are in the room.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, so one announcement before lunch, and I have a question to ask you. There's someone among us who went visiting last night to the Danforth and Pape neighborhood in downtown and forgot her jacket. And she's not going to be able to go back to get it. So I just wondered if there's anyone in the room that is going to that neighborhood tonight that might be willing to have a conversation about helping her get her jacket back. So if you could let me know, that would be great. And so we are going to have lunch. So the buffet is out there, right?
Yep. And I just wanted to say, leave your clickers at the table, please. And when you come back from lunch, okay, I'm going to try again. Most people in the room want to sit with other people, but they believe other people won't want to. and the core content.
Oh, right. Okay, and one last thing. Could I have a show, excuse me. Could I have a show of hands of how many people would like to see the core content across the hall in about 15 minutes?
Okay.
Okay, so we'll do it. We just wanted to make sure it was worth getting all the stuff over there. So enjoy your lunch and visit all the opportunities and keep talking. Thank you.